Hey everyone, Hans here. I'm gonna make a video. It's gonna be about what have you learned from Tolkien? What have you learned from Professor Tolkien and his works? That is a question I have not seen before. That I have not seen people ask themselves before. Maybe I'm tooting my own horn, but I only know myself as someone who did as much. And I know many fans of the lore, great people too. But when you truly ask them, what have you gotten out of it? They'll start bringing up lore and how much it touches them. It makes their hearts swell. It it lifts their spirits. And then I have to ask them, is that all? Usually it is, because they haven't brought it any further than that. But something about Lord of the Rings, one of the main reasons why it is so amazing, is that it embodies what you might call the virtue of Europeans or people or whites or Hyperboreans. Either of those three is fine. It embraces the inherent virtues of the white race: nobility, bravery, honor, decency, protecting what is yours, expanding on what is yours, beautifying the world, being in touch with nature, loving animals, animal care. That is part of Lord of the Rings too. Just look at the Airlings. That is one of the main reasons, I believe, why whatever happens in this fantasy world, if you will, is so compelling to so many millions. Most of those millions, white people. A few non-whites as well, that is totally up to them. I am not talking about that here. Now, why do I bring that up? It is because there are those in the world that you might simply call anti-whites, anti-Europeans, anti-Hyperboreans. They despise anything that comes from white people. The reason why, it doesn't matter. What you need to know is that their envy is insane, murderous, and without mercy, merciless. That's all you need to know about them, truly. And go look up more for yourself if you want to. I won't stop anyone from researching for oneself. That's all good and well. But I don't have time to lay that all out right here. Not today. There are some other videos where I broach some more on the topic too. You can go there. And otherwise you're gonna have to wait or look up stuff for yourself. It's that simple. But maybe bring it in a bit more detail. To clarify. For Hans, for example, for me. A character that has always been very appealing to me, a character that inspired me since I was 16, is Beorn. Most know who that is, if they read the books, if they read The Hobbit. Is this character who lives in the outdoors. He has his own homestead. He lives with his animals, he is a beekeeper. And, as Gandalf himself says about him, and it's not an exact quote, but it is something along the lines of, he is a wonderful friend to have, and a fierce foe. I always found that very inspiring. Just one sentence, and then you see the actions of Beorn in the story. Little as he is present, it taught me something. That, for example, By loving one thing, you do not outright need to hate something else. That is nonsense. It is unnecessary. And when something comes after what you love, be fierce. It is okay. It is in fact quite natural. The whole turning in a bear thing, that's just the skin changing, that's just awesome. That's just the wonders of fantasy, although it does find its roots also in ancient European stories, right? I think everyone knows what that would be, or most of them. But I'm gonna say a word that less people will know. Ulfhednar. That's all I'll give you. Because I'm in a mood to get people looking around, I suppose. But yeah. Or let's go with another character. Gandalf. He guides people, but they completely choose for themselves where they will go. Gandalf will not force anyone's hands. He just does what he can with the people who want to, and at the end of the day, it just is going to have to be enough to save Middle Earth. I can stand by that. That is a very respectful attitude to everyone's individual wish and how the populations of Middle Earth, the collectives of Middle Earth, then will do as a consequence of that. Well, that's fate, I suppose. But fair enough. I really appreciate Gandalf in that. Or Aragorn's refusal to be a king. He didn't really want to be a king. But what I learned from that is that a good man, a real man, doesn't need to bear a crown to do right by his people. Doesn't need a crown on his head to appreciate others, and doesn't need a crown to show how he is so much better than everyone else. The whole kingship thing is more so the symbolism of those virtues combined. That is very Eurocentric in attitude. Today we also have kings, of course, but I mean, seriously, they are only there because of political ploys and who knows what other kinds of shenanigans that really nobody cares for when it comes down to it. And there is so much more in that. And that's just for me. Other people can look at Eowyn, let's say a woman who looks at Eowyn, and she sees a young, from the books, a young woman, teenage girl, I think still, who, I suppose, to put it simply, who wants to fight alongside the man. It's not about proving how a woman can be just like the man. No, it's that she cares for her man. And she is going with him to the battlefield. How deep is that? How deep does it go? And then she achieves the impossible, together with a hobbit, who doesn't get as much credit as he should for felling the enemy commander. But yeah. And so much more. It goes so deep and it goes so far. At that point, for me, all the lore attached to that, the men of the West, the Eorlings, the Bardings, the Vanimar, essentially all the elves, the dwarves, the seven houses, and the Longbeards, the Broadbeams, the Iron Fists, the Firebeards, what are there other ones? The Stonefoots, I believe. The Blacklocks. Yeah, I'm a bit rusty. But all of that, it's fun to get into that. It's fun to learn a bit more about what you might say the meat of this of the story, if you will, the people that are present in it. But the spirit is the true reason why Lord of the Rings is so popular as this, I would argue. Because it has the potential to inspire people to take hold of their lives and to do right by their own. Do something for their people, as Professor Tolkien did something for his people. On the battlefield and off. How many writers can say that about themselves? And Professor Tolkien never once, from my understanding, boasted about any of that. Like most war veterans of that time. Maybe they realized they weren't fighting orcs so much, who knows. And that it all was just one big tragedy. The real lesson from the world wars. But that is it's kind of interlinked, but it's also a bit by the wayside. I'm not interested right now to get into that too much. A broader war, which should never have happened. But yeah, back to the spirit of Lord of the Rings, I suppose. Yeah. What have you learned from it, fan? It's a genuine question. It's not me pointing a finger at you. It's actually wondering, what have you learned from it and how is it impacting your life? Because it's not just a coping mechanism, if you will. Not in the least. It can be, but there is so much more to it. It should also give you the information, it should give you the inspiration to get out of whatever rut you're stuck in life. Makes sense? I think it does. It did for me. But there are these people in the world, I call them anti-whites, and that is what everyone should call them, who look at such stories and they know what it can mean for people, what it does mean for millions. And they say, we are going to take that away from the Westmen. We're going to take it away from them. And we're going to insert anti-Whiteism into it. We're going to white erase what is being present there. Those virtues, we're going to pretend that they belong to others. We're going to warp everything beyond recognition. It's anti-white. It's just straight up despicable. It's disgusting, the people who partake in this, and they should be called out for being anti-whites. That is the only thing what they truly are. You call them that, they won't even have a defense. They may accuse you of racism, then you say it's an anti-white slur. You just confirmed my suspicions. It's that simple. It truly is. All it takes is just the people to look at, for example, Aragorn, and say, well, no more. The fallen kingdoms will have to be restored, I suppose. The the orcs that are holding the script, I guess they're going to need to have that script. They're going to have to give that script back to the Westmen. The people that truly care. Now, of course, I brought this up to others, and then there are those who will make weak excuses in my eyes. I cannot respect it. I truly cannot. There are those who will say, but what about the men of Rune? And what about those of Umbar? Those aren't technically whites, they're not Westmen. And I'll have to say, you're right. But guess what? Their stories, that's not what Tolkien bases himself on. All stories, all the big, meaningful stories in Lord of the Rings are Eurocentric. They're centered on the Westmen, on the elves, and on the dwarves. I think in that order. And then the hobbits. All of which is Western. All of which stems from northern sagas, from Celtic sagas. And to then say, well, if Umbar has non-whites, that's in Tolkien's spirit. But is it now? It seems to me like at that point you're just making an excuse and abuse the lore to accommodate for these anti-whites to cause white erasure, because an anti-white will take it to, well, it wasn't, the Numenorians, they came to what at the time then wasn't Umbar yet, and they enslaved the non-white population, and the non-white population truly made Umbar, and then, black Numenorians and stuff, and blah blah, bad whitey. That's where it will be taken. That's how it will be presented in those shows. And the literary white erasure that takes place, the economic white erasure, meaning what should be a white actor but is a non-white actor that takes place, it is all there. What is it again? I saw that there's going to be this non-white, I don't care what kind of non-white, nobody should, I'm indifferent to it. A non-white is going to play as a Numenorian, maybe a few of them, but we're going to let that stand. That's white erasure. That has nothing to do with doing right by non-whites. That has to do with doing harm to whites. That's why it's called white erasure. Role by role, background by background, less and less Eurocentric, less and less white, and more non-white. Until maybe in a few years, maybe in a few generations, you'll have a Lord of the Rings that isn't even Lord of the Rings anymore, and everyone that's playing it will be a non-white. And the stories will, who knows what they'll be like at that point anymore. I guess then all these non-white groups will be fighting each other, if even still anyone cares at that point. But that is the true goal. It is to prevent white children of today, children being born right now, from ever knowing Lord of the Rings as it is meant to be read, to be seen. That is the entire point. Why? Because that's how anti-whites rob our people from this inspiration that could be garnered, from that joy of reading Lord of the Rings that so many feel. Because and to say, well, because there are non-whites somewhere in Middle Earth, even though they're barely ever in the stories, and always, by the way, in the service of Sauron, but what? Are there actually exceptions to that? Maybe, but wow, think you can count them on one hand, maybe? Perhaps. The Blue Wizards? Well, they're not non-whites, they're the Blue Wizards. They're the Istari, they're Maiar. No, it has to stop, and it has to be pulled in reverse, because there are many other stories that meant a lot to white people that have been absolutely wrecked with anti-Whiteism. Be it by inserting, by white erasure through casting non-whites that should be white roles, or be it by, gender loyalty, or gender conflict, which is always a sign of anti-Whiteism. Meaning, what is gender conflict? Well, that's basically people who cause conflict between the genders. Think of, they call themselves feminists. That's a very good example of those who commit gender conflict. It's anti-white, because it makes white men and white women fight each other, whereas they should love each other and protect each other and have children together. I guess I coined gender conflict, I think, in this video. What about that, right? A little bonus. But yeah. Oh well, and not to speak about, of course, the... Oh no, I'm not gonna go any further, but I think some people may know where. But that's by the wayside. Gender conflict is gender conflict, even if that conflict is within one person, which is disgusting. But yeah. So what else? The importance of learning these lessons is... Yeah, let's go there. The importance of learning these lessons, to look at these traits that are exhibited by these characters, is to understand that this is typical to the white biospirit, the spirit by which every healthy white is bound. And other races have their biospirit, and they may have some traits that are aligned, but that is not what we're on about here, because Lord of the Rings is a Eurocentric story, and that is okay. That is okay. Anti-whites will tell you it's wrong. Well, no, they are wrong. They are envious monsters that want to take away that which fills us with hope, with inspiration. They are the orcs. And you know what orcs are like if you're at the Lord of the Rings. They'll destroy for the sake of it. They erase for the sake of it. The inspiration that you can get out of this as an individual is not just in purpose of defending Lord of the Rings. It will help you through life. It might just make you a better person than you already are. Be more brave. Stand up for justice, even if it is at risk of your own life and limb maybe. Although I will not ask that of anyone, to actually risk his or her own neck. But damn it, stand up for what is right, at least with what you got. If you have artistic talent, do it through artistry. If you are a great orator, do it through talking. There are so many people who would do it so much better than I could. I know that. And I'm waiting for them to help me. Truly I am. And stop being mired in the swamp. Get out of politics. There is nothing there. And there doesn't need to be. It's the spirit within oneself. The inspiration that can be, what is embodied in Lord of the Rings so much. There is so much to get out of that. That is why they want to destroy it. Gradually, over time, they have patience. I can guarantee you that. They'll wait a few generations. But here's the thing, if people now really set their foot down and say this anti-Whiteism will stop, and now we're gonna look at all the anti-Whiteism and what happened before. Star Wars, I don't know, what else do you got? Indiana Jones, 300, anything where it can be found, any series. To go back and look there and say, wow, it's just white erasure of all kinds being present. And then we'll retake those stories too. Let Lord of the Rings be that white city, that bastion, that last bastion against the forces of darkness, where everyone gets on the walls. Yes, also non-whites that care are welcome, provided that they are there with good-natured intentions. But that is the same for whites, truly. White positive, as they call it. Get on the walls, and when the hordes come, in due time, be pushed back, as they push, be defended and then invited to leave, to go to other parts, I suppose, away from all that is good and sane and beautiful. And who knows, we may see a reversal not just on the white screen, I guess they call it, on the big screen. Not just on the big screen, but in society as a whole. I think symbolically, Lord of the Rings being that place where it all turned around could be the most beautiful gift as a fan of Lord of the Rings you could return to Professor Tolkien himself. Because that is the point where he might have said, I think, and I have never known him of course, but he might have though privately said to himself, I succeeded. My works achieved what they were meant to. My people got its mythos back, and as a consequence, they retook their own fate back. Be they hobbit, dwarf, maybe, or elf and man. And beauty came to Middle-earth again. The darkness was banished. Wouldn't that be beautiful? There's many millions who really love Lord of the Rings. That is many millions that you can stand shoulder to shoulder with, if only you're brave enough. Hans is going to be there. Who else? I hope it will be too many to count. And that is all I can say for now, I think. Inspiration. Lessons to be learned. Not the lore in and of itself alone, but what is actually going on. What are these characters going through? This is a war veteran who wrote this literature, and a linguist. If there was any writer on the planet that knows what he is doing, it was Professor Tolkien. And his spirit lives on as well. No, I'm gonna leave it there. For as far as Professor Tolkien goes. I have a few more minutes. I think I presented it as best as I can for now, this message. This isn't the last that I brought up about it. Because there is a lot of anti-Whiteism that takes place on many levels in society. It needs to stop. It needs to be reversed. It's time. They've come to one of the final bastions. Lord of the Rings is a perfect bastion to set your foot down and say, nope, this is it. This is where you absolutely cross the line on the sense of literature, in the sense of movies, series, what have you. It's done. Mordor is not going to be allowed to spread its influence any further. Anything else is just the bravery of good folk? How does that saying go again? Why did it need to happen in our time, Gandalf? Well, Frodo, there are many who in such desperate times were wondering the same. But it is not about in which time you're born. It is about what you do with the time that is given to you. It is not perhaps the most perfect quote, but I think where you know where it comes from if you've read the books. So, fan of Lord of the Rings, white positive person, either or both. What will you do with the time that is given to you? I know what I will do with what is given to mine. I hope many others will join me and align themselves with me, do the right thing. for the sake of Tolkien's spirit, for the sake of that spirit that binds all white men, all West men, not to harm others, but to defend what is their own. And it is a just fight, if you will. It is a just cause, because there is still some beauty in the world that is worth fighting for. Just draw your lessons and see what you can do. And with that said, you all have a good one. Think on it, act on it, and bye-bye.